So today we're going to be talking about starting to pay off debt in 2019. So whether this is your first time going through the process of wanting to pay off debt, or you've done it before in the past but maybe fell off the wagon and really want to get back into it, stick around so you can learn all the different things when it comes to going through this process. And I hope that you get a lot of great value out of this. Hello fellow wealth builders, and welcome back to the True Financials channel. Really quick though, if you are new here, my name is Dennis, and on this show we love talking about personal finance to really help you build your wealth and be more financially free. And I want to take you on this journey, so make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and the bell to get notifications when new videos come up. So if you are watching this video, whether it's 2019 or even beyond, that means that you are being intentional with how you want to manage your money for the future. And I'm so happy that you're here and learning and growing. So what we're going to talk about is a couple of different things that are going to help you become more successful when it comes to paying off your debt. Paying off debt can be very overwhelming. A lot of times there's so much going on when it comes to being able to manage our money that it can just seem daunting to even look at our overall debts. And so I really want to help you out and kind of make sure that you understand that if you go through this process, if you really pay attention, that it can be really worth it in the end to be able to manage more of your money and have more control, because as of right now, your money is controlling you versus you controlling your money. One of the first things that you really want to do when it comes to going through the process of starting to pay off your debt is to have everything written down. All of your debts have to be written down to be able to go through this process properly. Now, if it means having to pause this video really quick and go grab a piece of paper and a pen, make sure you do that. Make sure you stop the video, put everything down on a piece of paper, and then start back up. So whether you pause the video or you just grab that piece of paper and are starting to write everything down, make sure that you put every single thing that you have down as a debt, so that way you have a full understanding of where you stand at this current moment as you start this process. So yes, after writing all of this stuff down, it might seem very daunting with the big numbers that you might have, whether it's credit card debt, car loans, student loans, all these different things. But I promise you, going through this process and getting everything done and taken care of is going to make it a lot easier and a lot better for you down the road. And it might be difficult in between, I'm not gonna lie, it might be difficult, but I promise you it will be worth it. So next up, what you want to do after you have all your debts written down is start to look at your spending habits. Now, if a lot of your debt comes from consumer debt, which is typically credit cards, now we want to start looking at those bank statements. And I know it can be tough to look at bank statements, but if we look at the last 3 months, that will kind of give us an idea of where a lot of our money is going. Now, for a majority of people, that tends to be eating out, whether it's at restaurants or fast food. And so obviously that means that we are overspending in this category. And if this happens to be your category, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with wanting to go out to eat. I think we get this notion that, just because we enjoy something doesn't mean that it's, the wrong thing to do just because it's what we spend the most of our money on. You can spend your money the way you want to, of course, but if you're going into debt for it, then we're definitely not spending properly and wisely when it comes to using our money. So once you look at your habits and kind of start learning on where you're spending the most, and you want to take back that and say, hey, you know what? For a short time, I'm going to actually go ahead and either stop those things or wait until I have enough money to pay for those things in cash. So that way you're going to be less likely to want to continue going into debt, because of course, starting to pay off debt, you don't want to consistently go back into debt as well. So after you figure out where your spending habits are, then you want to start deciding where you find the most value when it comes to your spending. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people like to go out to eat. Me personally, I'm not a fan of going out to eat. I just don't get the value the same way that a lot of other people do when I go to a sit-down restaurant versus eating at home. But on the flip side, I love going to the movies, but I do understand that other people don't see value in watching a movie in theaters when they can wait for it to come on to like Netflix or rent it from Redbox or any other format that can potentially save them a lot more money. So we all have to decide what gives us the most value for our money and make sure that we put our focus in that area first before we spend all of our money in all these other places. And again, if we are spending money on a credit card versus just paying cash for it, then that we are overspending on our things that bring us value, and that ends up not being a good thing, because then all of a sudden we're going into more debt, which of course is something we don't want to do while we're going through the process of actually paying off debt. All right, so now that you have everything written down and then you actually looked at your spending habits and then also decided on what brings you the most value, now it's time to actually look at paying off your debt. Now, there are 2 very popular methods to paying off debt, and you've definitely probably heard of them before, and they are called the debt snowball and the debt avalanche methods. And I will have a video in the link down below that will go into a lot more detail if you want to learn more about these, but as a quick rundown, the debt snowball is where you take your debts from smallest to largest regardless of the interest and actually pay down the smallest one first and then continue on to the next debt. And then the debt avalanche method is the one where you actually take your highest interest rate first and start paying that down and then continue going on from there. Now, either method is actually great to go with as long as you're being intentional with how you spend your money. I think a lot of times people kind of argue over the fact of which one's more effective for somebody. But of course, this is personal finance, which means everything is personal. So everything is going to work differently for every single person, depending on your situation, your debts, and everything in between. So make sure that you look at those two methods. Don't stress about it too much on which way to go. Plus, you can also swap if you needed to, if one method doesn't work the same way as the other, and you're welcome to do that. Now, for me personally, I like the debt snowball method because it does build up momentum, and momentum is huge when it comes to paying off debt, because as I mentioned, sometimes this can take months and even years to go through the process, but it can be worth it as long as you keep that momentum going. So after choosing whether you want to do the debt snowball or the debt avalanche or any type of method to pay off debt, next up you want to do is actually set up some type of an emergency fund. And an emergency fund typically can be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, whatever works for your personal budget and your style of living. And for the reason to actually have this type of emergency fund is so that way if something were to happen while you were paying off debt, you don't actually potentially have to go back into debt. Now, I know a lot of times people will question why you want to have money set aside when that money could be used to pay off some more debt. One of the biggest reasons is because you don't want to have to go into more debt if you're going through the process. So if you're 4 months in and then something happens with your car and you had to pay $800 out of pocket, it's a lot easier to have that money from the emergency fund versus having to use it on a credit card and then feel like you're backtracking on all the progress you made during those first 4 months. So it's really helpful to be able to keep you on track and keep you motivated while you're going through that process. So definitely consider having an emergency fund in place. Now that you have your emergency fund in place, the next thing that you want to do, and this is my personal favorite thing, is actually writing down whatever your fear is with money, either on paper or spoken out loud to another person. And the reason this is so incredibly important is because fear has a tendency to continue to grow exponentially in our heads versus when it's out on paper or out verbally. And you can have any type of fear when it comes to money, whether it is not making enough, potentially not having anything for retirement, maybe the fact that you're going to be in debt forever, maybe the fact that you're going to live paycheck to paycheck forever. Whatever that fear is, make sure you say it out loud because it's going to actually give you a little bit of a sigh of relief when it comes to going through this process. Now, I know it might seem silly for a lot of people to go through that, but I feel like it's very effective. And I've actually seen some really great results when I've actually had other people tell me their fears when it comes to money, because then at that point, it almost sounds a little sillier than it does in their own heads, and they feel a lot more comfortable with the whole process at that point. So if you have any kind of fears when it comes to money, because I know a lot of us do, make sure that you have that written down for yourself. And if you like, you are more than welcome to share that in the comments down below. You definitely don't have to, but I know that can also be a place to kind of let out that fear so that way you don't have to have it in your head all alone. So once you have that fear written down or spoken out loud, then the last thing you really want to do to be effective when it comes to starting to pay off debt is to have a goal. Now, of course, goals are very important for anything that we want to do to be able to achieve something better. But when it comes to paying off debt, sometimes it can seem very daunting to have any other type of goal than actually paying off your debt. Now, for me personally, I like having goals physically printed out, whether it's a car, whether it's a house, whether it's a travel trip that you want to go on, or anything else. When you have something tangible or something to look at every single time, it really does help to be able to achieve that goal. Because for you, you might be in a position to not be able to think every single day of the goals that you want. But having a photo somewhere, either on a fridge or your workspace, to be able to see that goal, so that way you know that you're working really hard to be able to achieve it. So, make sure you have that goal. If you can, possibly print it out, written down somewhere if needed, or whatever works for you. But make sure that you have that somewhere so you can be understanding of where you want to go for the future, and the fact that it's not just for paying off debt, but it can be something else to be able to help. And that way you can actually have something to look forward to. So let me know you got value out of this video by hitting that like button down below. And then I have a playlist right over here for you that's actually going to go over some big budgeting mistakes that people make, because budgets are also a really great way to help you get out of debt.